Inside Zambia's courts, the fight for justice has turned into a battle for power. Former President Edgar Lungu, better known as ECL, faces rulings that many say are already decided before the judges even speak. Critics argue the government always wins, while his supporters call it nothing more than a political witch hunt. But is this just another legal case, or a struggle that could decide Zambia's future and shake Africa's political balance? Tonight, we break down the courtroom drama, the judge's role, and why the world is paying attention. Zambia's legal system is once again under the spotlight. Former President Edgar Lungu, ECL, continues to fight legal battles, but many ask, are the rulings fair or political? In this documentary, we uncover why courts are accused of favoring the government, how ECL's appeals are seen as time-wasting tactics by some and justice delayed by others, the role of HH's government in Zambia's legal battles, why this fight has caught the attention of the US, UK, and Africa's biggest powers, what this means for Zambia's future democracy and stability. Subscribe to InspirAfrica Official for deep dives into Zambia, Africa, and global politics. The Courtroom Showdown. The Courtroom Showdown refers to the high-stakes legal and political battles surrounding former Zambian President Edgar Lungu, ECL, and his interactions with Zambia's judiciary, particularly under the administration of his successor, President Hakainde Hichilema, HH. These battles encompass disputes over judicial independence, electoral eligibility, and, most recently, the contentious issue of ECL's burial following his death in June 2025. The showdown has not only gripped Zambia but also drawn attention across Africa and beyond, highlighting tensions between executive power, judicial autonomy, and democratic principles. This saga involves several key events. 2016 election petition. ECL's presidency was challenged by HH, who alleged electoral irregularities. The Constitutional Court, presided over by Justices Sidali, Munjini Mulna, and Palan Malanda, dismissed HH's petition, a decision that fueled accusations of judicial bias. 2021 election ruling. The same judges controversially allowed ECL to contest the 2021 elections despite constitutional limits on presidential terms, a decision later reversed by the Constitutional Court in 2024, barring ECL from running in 2026. Judicial suspensions and dismissals. In 2024, President HH suspended and later sacked the 3 Constitutional Court judges, citing misconduct, prompting allegations of executive overreach and revenge. ECL's death and burial dispute. Following ECL's death in South Africa in June 2025, a legal battle erupted over whether his body should be repatriated to Zambia for a state funeral or buried privately in South Africa as per his family's wishes. These events, set against the backdrop of Zambia's 2026 elections and a polarized political landscape, have raised questions about judicial independence, executive power, and the rule of law in Zambia. The Courtroom Showdown is not just a legal dispute, but a reflection of deeper political rivalries and systemic challenges in Zambia's democracy. ECL's legal battles explain. Edgar Lungu's legal battles are multifaceted, spanning his political career, electoral disputes, and posthumous conflicts over his legacy. Below, I outline the major legal confrontations. 1. 2016 presidential election petition. In 2016, ECL, representing the Patriotic Front (PF), won the presidential election against HH of the United Party for National Development (UPND). HH challenged the results, alleging electoral fraud and irregularities. The Constitutional Court, comprising Justices Sidali, Munjini Mulna, and Palan Malanda, dismissed the petition, citing insufficient evidence. This ruling was controversial, as critics argue the court failed to thoroughly investigate the claims, leading to accusations of bias in favor of ECL. Social commentator Laura Mitty later stated that the judges misbehaved spectacularly in handling the petition, reflecting public sentiment that the judiciary was compromised. The dismissal entrenched distrust in the judiciary, particularly among UPND supporters, who viewed it as evidence of ECL's influence over state institutions. This set the stage for ongoing tensions between ECL and HH, which would resurface in later legal battles. 2. 2021 election eligibility ruling. ECL's eligibility to run in the 2021 elections was another flashpoint. Zambia's constitution limits presidents to 2 5-year terms. ECL argued that his first term, 2015 to 2016, which completed the late President Michael Satta's term, should not count as a full term. The Constitutional Court, including the same 3 judges, ruled in his favor, allowing him to contest the 2021 election, which he lost to HH. This decision was widely criticized as politically motivated, with opponents arguing it violated constitutional intent. In December 2024, the Constitutional Court reversed this ruling, declaring ECL ineligible for the 2026 elections, stating he had already served 2 terms, 2015 to 2016 and 2016 to 2021. The court's reversal, following the dismissal of the 3 judges who had supported ECL's 2021 candidacy, fueled perceptions of judicial manipulation by HH's administration. ECL himself described the verdict as influenced by political manipulation. 3. Judicial suspensions and dismissals. 2024. In September 2024, President HH suspended Justices Sidali, Mulna, and Malanda, citing pending recommendations from the Judicial Complaints Commission (JCC) for alleged misconduct related to their 2016 and 2021 rulings. The judges lost a court application to review the suspension, and in October 2024, HH sacked them, prompting widespread controversy. Critics, including ECL's lawyer Makibi Zulu, called the dismissals illegal, arguing they undermined judicial independence. The United Kwacha Alliance (UKA) described the move as an assault on the judiciary and a blatant act of vengeance. Supporters of HH, such as former Vice President Nevers Mumba, defended the dismissals, citing constitutional provisions allowing the president to act on JCC recommendations. However, critics like Laura Mitty argued that HH's actions, while legal, appeared self-serving given his personal stake in the 2016 petition. 4. Burial Dispute 2025. Following ECL's death on June 5, 2025, in South Africa, a legal battle emerged over his burial. The Zambian government, led by Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha, sought to repatriate ECL's body for a state funeral at Embassy Park in Lusaka, citing constitutional provisions for former heads of state. ECL's family, led by former First Lady Esther Lungu, preferred a private burial in South Africa, claiming ECL had instructed that HH not be involved in his funeral due to their rivalry. On August 8, 2025, the Pretoria High Court ruled in favor of the Zambian government, ordering the repatriation of ECL's body. The decision sparked emotional reactions, with ECL's sister Bertha Lungu breaking down in court, alleging the government sought to perform rituals with ECL's remains. The family appealed the ruling, delaying repatriation. This dispute highlighted the ongoing feud between ECL's family and HH's administration, with the family accusing the government of breaching funeral agreements. 5. Other legal challenges. ECL faced additional legal issues, including a 2023 challenge against the state's decision to block his travel to South Korea for a World Peace Summit, which he deemed unreasonable, illegal, and procedurally improper. Additionally, his return to active politics led to the withdrawal of his retirement benefits, a decision he contested, arguing it did not apply posthumously. These battles underscore the intersection of law and politics in Zambia, with ECL's cases reflecting broader struggles over power, constitutional interpretation, and judicial autonomy. Judges under pressure. The pressure on Zambia's judiciary, particularly the Constitutional Court, has been a central theme in the ECL-HH saga. Several factors contribute to this pressure. 1. Executive influence. Zambia's constitution grants the president significant power over judicial appointments and removals, subject to recommendations from the Judicial Service Commission and National Assembly approval. Academic Sishiwa argues that this structure inherently risks executive interference, as the appointment process is led by the executive. The suspension and dismissal of the 3 constitutional court judges in 2024 exemplify this concern. Critics argue that HH used the JCC's recommendations as a pretext to remove judges who had ruled against him, raising questions about judicial independence. The JCC's role has also been scrutinized. Despite previously clearing the judges of misconduct allegations, the commission later recommended their suspension, leading to accusations of inconsistency and political pressure. The timing of the dismissals, ahead of the 2026 elections, further fueled perceptions of executive manipulation. 2. Public and political criticism. Judges face intense scrutiny from political actors and the public. ECL's public statements, such as his warning that Zambia was veering toward dictatorship and his call for Zambians to fight the injustice against the judiciary, placed additional pressure on the courts. Similarly, HH's defenders, including government spokespersons like Cornelius Muitwa, have emphasized the legality of the dismissals, framing critics as undermining the rule of law. This polarized rhetoric creates an environment where judges must navigate competing political narratives. 3. Constitutional Court's role. The Constitutional Court is at the heart of Zambia's electoral disputes, making it a lightning rod for controversy. Its rulings on ECL's eligibility and the 2016 petition have been pivotal, yet each decision has drawn accusations of bias from one side or the other. The court's reversal of its 2021 ruling in 2024, after the dismissal of the 3 judges, suggests external influences may have shaped its decisions. 4. Broader African context. Across Africa, judiciaries face similar pressures. An Afrobarometer survey found that 43% of Africans distrust courts, with 33% believing judges are corrupt. In Zambia, this distrust is exacerbated by high-profile cases like ECL's, where judicial decisions are perceived as politically motivated. The dismissal of judges mirrors tactics in countries like Zimbabwe, where constitutional amendments have increased executive control over the judiciary. The pressure on Zambia's judges reflects a broader struggle to maintain judicial independence in a politically charged environment. The executive's constitutional powers, combined with public and political scrutiny, create a challenging landscape for the judiciary. Is the government always winning? The perception that the government, under HH, is consistently prevailing in legal battles requires nuanced analysis. While HH's administration has secured favorable outcomes in several cases, the broader context suggests a mixed record. 1. Judicial dismissals. The suspension and subsequent dismissal of the 3 constitutional court judges in 2024 were clear victories for HH's administration. The presidency justified the move as lawful, citing the JCC's recommendations and constitutional provisions. However, critics argue that the dismissals were strategically timed to influence the Constitutional Court's composition ahead of the 2026 elections, suggesting a calculated win rather than a purely legal one. 2. ECL's eligibility ruling. The Constitutional Court's December 2024 ruling barring ECL from the 2026 elections was another government victory, as it eliminated a key political rival. The decision overturned a prior ruling that had allowed ECL to run in 2021, aligning with HH's interests. However, ECL's claim of political manipulation and the dismissal of the judges who supported his 2021 candidacy suggest the government's influence over the judiciary may have played a role. 3. Burial dispute. The Pretoria High Court's August 2025 ruling to repatriate ECL's body to Zambia was a significant win for the government, reinforcing its authority to oversee the funeral of a former head of state. However, the family's appeal has delayed implementation, indicating that the government's victory is not yet final. 4. Counterexamples. Despite these wins, the government has faced setbacks. The JCC initially cleared the 3 judges of misconduct, suggesting limits to executive influence. Additionally, public and international criticism of HH's actions, including from civil society and ECL supporters, indicates that the government's victories come at a reputational cost. The family's ability to halt ECL's repatriation temporarily through an appeal further demonstrates that the government does not always prevail outright. 5. Perception versus reality. The perception that the government always wins stems from its constitutional powers and strategic timing of judicial interventions. However, these victories are often pyrrhic, as they fuel accusations of authoritarianism and erode public trust in institutions. Laura Mitty's observation that HH's actions are legal but self-serving encapsulates this tension. The government's legal successes are tempered by political and social backlash, suggesting it does not always win in the broader sense. Appeals, justice, or time wasting. The appeals in ECL's legal battles, particularly the burial dispute, raise questions about whether they serve justice or merely delay inevitable outcomes. 1. Burial dispute appeal. ECL's family appealed the Pretoria High Court's August 2025 ruling to repatriate his body, arguing that the government breached funeral agreements and that ECL wished to avoid HH's involvement. This appeal has delayed the repatriation, keeping ECL's body in South Africa pending further hearings. Critics argue this is time-wasting, as the government's legal position, based on constitutional provisions for state funerals, appears strong. Attorney General Mulalo Kabesha described the ruling as sound judgment, suggesting the appeal may lack merit. However, the family's perspective is rooted in distrust of HH's administration, fueled by their long-standing rivalry. The emotional reaction of ECL's sister Bertha, who alleged the government sought to perform rituals, reflects genuine concerns about the government's intentions. From this angle, the appeal seeks justice by ensuring ECL's wishes are respected, even if the legal odds favor the state. 2. Judicial dismissal appeals. The sacked Constitutional Court judges also sought a review of their suspension, which they lost, paving the way for their dismissal. Critics, including Makibi Zulu, argued that the appeal process was undermined by the JCC's alleged inconsistency and executive pressure. The appeal's failure suggests it may have been a futile attempt to delay the inevitable, given the president's constitutional authority to act on JCC recommendations. 3. Justice versus delay. Appeals can serve justice by providing oversight and correcting errors, but they can also be strategic tools to delay outcomes. In the burial case, the appeal reflects genuine grievances but risks prolonging a sensitive issue, potentially escalating tensions. In the judicial dismissals, the appeal process appeared to lack teeth, as the executive's influence over the JCC limited its effectiveness. The broader pattern suggests that appeals in politically charged cases often struggle to deliver justice when systemic biases favor the ruling party. HH's role in the legal tug-of-war. President Hakainde Hichilema's role in these legal battles is central, as his administration's actions have shaped the courtroom showdown. 1. Judicial suspensions and dismissals. HH's decision to suspend and sack the 3 Constitutional Court judges was a defining moment. While framed as a response to JCC recommendations, the move was widely seen as retaliation for the judges' 2016 and 2021 rulings, which favored ECL. HH's defenders, including Clayson Hamasaka and Cornelius Muitwa, argue that he acted within constitutional bounds, emphasizing the rule of law. However, critics like Laura Mitty and the UKA contend that HH's personal stake in the 2016 petition undermines the legitimacy of his actions. 2. Burial dispute. HH's administration, through the Attorney General, aggressively pursued the repatriation of ECL's body, citing national interest and constitutional precedent. This stance clashed with ECL's family's wishes, escalating tensions. The family's accusation that HH disregarded agreed funeral arrangements suggests a lack of consultation, further straining relations. HH's condolence message, calling for unity and compassion, contrasted with his administration's legal assertiveness, highlighting a disconnect between rhetoric and action. 3. Political motivations. HH's actions are shaped by the intense rivalry with ECL, who remained a formidable political figure despite losing the 2021 election. The dismissal of judges and the burial dispute occur in the context of the 2026 elections, where HH seeks to consolidate power. Critics argue that HH is using legal mechanisms to neutralize opposition, a tactic seen in other African countries where incumbents co-opt courts to entrench power. 4. Public perception. HH's role has polarized Zambians. Supporters view him as upholding the rule of law, while opponents see him as undermining democracy. Social media posts on X reflect this divide, with some praising HH's economic engagements, e.g. $19 billion in MOUs with Qatar, while others, like at Joseph_Kalimbwe, express sympathy for ECL's family and criticize HH's government. Global reactions. US, UK, and Africa's response. The ECL Courtroom Showdown has drawn limited but notable international attention, primarily from African media and regional leaders. 1. United States and United Kingdom. There is no direct evidence of official statements from the US or UK governments regarding ECL's legal battles or the burial dispute. However, Western nations typically monitor judicial independence and democratic governance in Africa, as seen in their responses to similar issues in Zimbabwe and the DRC. The lack of explicit commentary may reflect a focus on larger geopolitical issues, such as trade disputes or conflicts in the Middle East, as noted in Reuters reports. 2. African response. South Africa's role is significant due to the Pretoria High Court's involvement in the burial dispute. The court's ruling in favor of Zambia's government was covered by outlets like EWN, with posts on X highlighting the emotional impact on ECL's family. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa expressed condolences, noting the privilege of caring for ECL during his treatment. Across Africa, the case resonates with broader concerns about judicial capture. The African Commission on Human and People's Rights has established a focal point on judicial independence, reflecting regional efforts to address issues like those in Zambia. Media outlets like BBC Africa and the Zambian Observer have extensively covered the saga, framing it as a test of Zambia's democracy. 3. Continental implications. The ECL case has parallels in other African nations, such as Zimbabwe, where judicial appointments are politicized, and the DRC, where electoral disputes are routinely dismissed by courts. These comparisons amplify the case's significance, positioning Zambia as a case study in the struggle for judicial independence. Zambia's future at risk. The Courtroom Showdown poses significant risks and opportunities for Zambia's future, particularly in the realms of democracy, governance, and social cohesion. 1. Judicial independence. The dismissal of judges and the perception of executive overreach threaten Zambia's judicial independence. Sishiwa's argument that executive-led appointments perpetuate incompetent judiciaries highlights a systemic issue. Without reforms to insulate the judiciary from political influence, public trust in the courts, already low per Afrobarometer data, will erode further. 2. Political polarization. The ECL-HH rivalry has deepened political divisions, with the 2026 elections looming as a potential flashpoint. ECL supporters, including the PF and UKA, view HH's actions as dictatorial, while UPND supporters see them as necessary to correct past judicial wrongs. This polarization risks destabilizing Zambia, a country historically known for relative stability. 3. Rule of law. The legal battles underscore tensions between constitutional provisions and their application. While HH's actions are legally grounded, their perceived motives undermine the rule of law. The burial dispute, in particular, raises questions about balancing state authority with individual rights, a critical issue for Zambia's democratic framework. 4. International reputation. Zambia's handling of these disputes affects its standing as a democratic model in Africa. Criticism from civil society and regional bodies could deter investment and diplomatic support, especially as HH pursues economic initiatives like the $19 billion Qatar MOUs. 5. Path forward. To mitigate risks, Zambia could pursue judicial reforms, such as those advocated by civil society, to ensure financial and administrative independence for the judiciary. Transparent dialogue between the government and ECL's family could also resolve the burial dispute, fostering national unity. HH's call for solemnity, unity, and compassion must be matched by actions that prioritize reconciliation over confrontation. Conclusion. The ECL Courtroom Showdown encapsulates Zambia's struggle to balance executive power, judicial independence, and democratic principles. ECL's legal battles, from electoral disputes to the burial controversy, highlight systemic challenges in Zambia's governance. The pressure on judges, the government's legal victories, and the role of appeals reflect a complex interplay of law and politics. HH's actions, while constitutionally defensible, risk deepening polarization and eroding trust in institutions. Globally, the saga draws attention to broader African challenges with judicial capture, while domestically, it poses risks to Zambia's stability and democratic future. Resolving these tensions requires reforms, dialogue, and a commitment to the rule of law over political expediency.